Hey guys, M Zizzle back again for another daily fantasy video. This week we're going to be looking at the Sunday slate, so the 1 o'clock games and 4 o'clock games, kind of walk you through the players that I am going to be targeting at each different position. We're going to focus on Draftkings, and I have Draftkings kind of pulled up, but if you play FanDuel, you'll also be able to, kind of take what I'm saying in this video and be able to play a bunch of the players that I mentioned here over on FanDuel. Obviously, there are different prices, so some players may be better value on one site versus the other, but I think most of my main targets will be, good selections on both websites. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with the quarterback position. So kind of some guys that jump out to me. Obviously, I think Drew Brees is a great play, but he is very expensive. I'm kind of more of the thought process of paying down at quarterback. So I would tend to try to go for someone a little bit cheaper. But obviously, if you want to go Breeze, I think he's going to put up big numbers. They're at home again. They didn't play well, fully as a team last week. So I expect New Orleans to win the game and win it pretty convincingly. The game script won't set up as well for them where they'll be playing from behind. I think they're going to, jump out front early and kind of win this game by 2 touchdowns or so. So he may not be throwing all the way till the end of the game, but he's going to rack up a bunch of points for you. Some other quarterbacks really like Philip Rivers, obviously playing Buffalo, who's trash. Don't have to say much about that. Roethlisberger in this Kansas City game is a phenomenal play, but again, he is the second most expensive quarterback, so you got to take that into consideration. You're going to have to pay down at some other positions, but he's going to put up big numbers, so I definitely like him, especially in GPPs if you stack him with Antonio Brown or Smith-Schuster and Connor and kind of go for that whole offense. But for my cash main lineup, I'm probably going to try to go, like I said, a little bit cheaper. Cam Newton not going to really touch. Brady's got a tough matchup this week. Cousins is interesting. I don't mind him, but again, for 6,400, I think there's better players that are cheaper. So Deshaun Watson I really like. I think he bounces back. I think he had a tough, opening day, kind of getting the rust off, but I think that against Tennessee, he had big game last year against them. I could see him having a monster day, hooking up with Hopkins. Fuller's coming back, which will be big for his kind of big playability. And I could see Watson being someone who's also kind of maybe not targeted as much as some of these other names that we mentioned. He may kind of hide and go under the radar a little bit, so that's why I like him really in GPPs. But I don't think he's a bad cash play either. I think Houston wins this game pretty easily. They are on the road, and Tennessee, he's got a solid team and solid defense, but I just, especially with Mariota banged up or he may not play, it's going to put a lot of pressure on that Tennessee defense. And I think Houston just kind of, has a big day. Watson has a big bounce back day, and he's definitely someone that I'd look to target. The next guy that I think is a good play is Patrick Mahomes. I'll probably have a little bit of him. He's just got a really good match. I think that Kansas City-Pittsburgh game is going to be really high scoring. Probably the most points as far of a game total for the whole slate in general will be this Kansas City-Pittsburgh game. I mean, I could see both teams scoring into the 30s, high 20s easily. And if that comes to fruition, Mahomes is going to put up a lot of points. It seems like him and Tyreek Hill kind of have something going on there, and if you can get Tyreek Hill the ball in good spots, that's just big plays waiting to happen. So I do like Patrick Mahomes, to have a really big week again. I just think that game in general is going to be super high scoring, and, you'll want to get in on that action. Stafford, I think, is a solid play. I think he bounces back. Another guy that's going to really be under the radar. No one's going to be on him. So I'm not going to really have any of him, but I wouldn't be crazy if you got some Stafford and some Galladay and Tate or Marvin Jones and ran a GPP with that. I do think that the Detroit-San Francisco game will be a pretty high-scoring game, kind of back and forth. So I think Stafford bounces back, and he played so poorly last week. I think he'll want to come out and kind of prove that he still, has it, still a really good quarterback, and will have a pretty big day, especially against that San Francisco defense who really is not very good. So the next guy I'd really like to talk about here is Garoppolo. Love Garoppolo. Uh, I think that he just had a really bad matchup in week one going against the Vikings. And even saying that, he makes a throw or two that he usually makes, and he actually has a big day last week. I mean, Kittle, he could have hit for a touchdown, and he just missed some throws. And again, was just on the road against, arguably the best defense in football. And that's a tough matchup for anyone, especially, a team like San Francisco who really doesn't have tons of weapons. Marquise Goodwin also got injured in that game, didn't even play the whole thing. So just a really tough matchup. I think he bounces back and has a big day. Um, and then another quarterback that I like is Case Keenum. I think that Keenum's just really solid. I think Oakland's trash. I think their whole team's trash. Offense, defense, the whole 9 yards. I think Gruden's going to be a total bust, and I'm going to target them a lot this year. And Keenum's got weapons. I mean, I love Emmanuel Sanders, love Demaryius Thomas. They got Lindsey now out of the backfield that he can throw to. They got Freeman. They just have a good group of guys that are all really solid. They get to play at home, and I just think he's going to have a really solid day. I could see a 250 and 2 to 3 touchdowns, and for 5,800 that price, you really can't beat it. So those are kind of the guys that I'm going to target. I don't hate Darnold for a GPP if you wanted to really, really go cheap. But, mostly I like Keenum, Garoppolo, Mahomes, and Watson. And then obviously if you're going to pay up, you can go with Breeze or Roethlisberger or maybe some Phillip Rivers as well. But, if we're going to build a lineup here just like we did on the Showdown video, so I'm going to actually throw Jimmy Garoppolo into my quarterback position for cash. I just think for his price point and the game script and how things are going to go, I think that he's a really solid play. So now if we go to running backs, you have to start up top with Kamara and Gurley. Both have really good matchups. They're scoring machines, but they're so expensive. If you're going to play either of those guys, it's just going to really be tough to get a good cash lineup together. You're going to have to really go low on a receiver, really go low on tight end, probably go low on defense or in your flex position. And when I'm building my lineup for cash, I don't know that I want to necessarily do that. I want to have guys that are going to give me points, and have high floors. So I don't think I can go there in cash with either of these guys just because they're too expensive, and they really are going to have days like Kamara had last week where he's got 46, 50 points to really pay off and make it worth my while. But GPPs, throw them in, see what you could do. If you can make it work, then you go for it. But for me, they're just too expensive for what I'm trying to do for this video and for this lineup that I'm building here. So if we move down, a guy that I really love is Melvin Gordon. Playing against Buffalo, like I said before, is just trash. Their defense is trash. The whole team's trash. The Chargers are going to bounce back and get a victory, I think, pretty big. And Buffalo really is not good against running backs. And Gordon just was so involved last week. I mean, if we take a look, he had 15 rushes and 13 targets as a receiver out of the backfield, 9 catches, 100 yards. I think that this is going to be a little less in this game, especially because they're going to be up front. They're not going to be throwing and trying to catch up like they were last week against Kansas City. But I think he rushes the ball, over 20 times potentially. I think he scores a touchdown. And I also think he gets, at least 3-4 receptions as well. So I really like Gordon. I like the game script. I think they get up big. They need to run the football. And he's just really been involved. So I really like Gordon. And I'm going to actually slot him in. I think he's actually probably one of my favorite, and core plays of the slate. I also like the guy right underneath him, Christian McCaffrey. We look at McCaffrey last week. Only 10 rushes, but again, 9 targets, 6 catches, 45 yards. and now Greg Olson's out. I think they're going to throw to him even more. They're also playing Atlanta. Atlanta has been notorious for giving up receptions to running backs. Their whole defensive philosophy is to funnel kind of the play to the middle of the field, to the running backs, to check down to those type of players and kind of take away the outside. And that falls right into what McCaffrey does best. And I think that Carolina just doesn't have many options of who they're going to throw the football to with Olsen out. So they're going to start funneling more of the offense than they already were to McCaffrey. So I really like him as well. I think he's a great play. If we move down, James Conner. I think he's really a must play at this point. I'm going to slot him in right away before I even go into things. But really, he's getting the ball an insane amount of times. 31 rushes, 5 catches on 6 targets. Obviously, I don't see this happening again. The game went to overtime, and just kind of how things worked out, they ran the ball more than they will on a regular basis. But Pittsburgh, doesn't matter if it's Le'Veon Bell, if it's D'Angelo Williams, if it's James Conner, like they feed the running backs. And he's at 6,700. He should probably be, at minimum 7,500, maybe an $8,000 player with just his role and in this game. Again, this game's gonna score points, Kansas City and Pittsburgh. So you want to have exposure to it. So this is where I'm going to start to get my exposure, and I'm going to put James Conner in the lineup, and he's another one of my core guys. Just to say some other guys I like, I think Dalvin Cook's a decent play, 6,500. He's going to be under the radar. Not a lot of people are going to play him. Green Bay can, as you saw last week, give up plays to the running backs. Cook is playing to large majority of the snaps. See 80%, 57 of 71 snaps last week. So Latavius Murray wasn't stealing from him. He got 6 receptions on 7 targets, 16 rushes. And the Packers struggled a little bit last week covering the running backs out of the backfield with Howard and Tariq Cohen. So I think he's a solid play. If we move down, I like Chris Thompson. I like both him and Adrian Peterson. I don't even think it's crazy to play both in a GPP. Thompson obviously is more valuable on Draftkings and FanDuel because of the full PPR points. But, he only had 5 rushes, but 65 yards. I mean, the guy's a big play machine. He had 6 catches last week. So he doesn't get the volume, but he still produces. He's a little bit like a poor man's Alvin Kamara, where he just can do a lot with a little. And I think they have a great matchup against Indy. And I think that he's a solid play, as is Adrian Peterson. So we keep moving down here. We mentioned Adrian Peterson, 5,500. I think that's a solid play. And, those are kind of the guys that I want to target. I think Deion Lewis is not terrible. Lamar Miller's not terrible. Tevin Coleman, if Freeman is officially out of the lineup, not terrible, but I just don't love the matchup. But I wouldn't say you're crazy for doing it. Trying to see if there's anybody else. James White, people are going to mention. I just don't like the matchup. He's going to maybe be the only running back that they have. So if you had to fit him in and he's your guy, you only got 4,500, you need a player. I don't think he's the worst option. I also think Jacksonville kind of is going to try to take away the outside guys. That's what they do best, and then they're they may be forced to check the ball down, and that's where James White is kind of makes his money in that type of game. So I could see it. And then another flyer could be Duke Johnson too. I think that New Orleans is going to get up big. Cleveland's going to have to come back. They're going to be passing all the way till the end of the game, and Duke Johnson is their third down back. So I think he could actually get a decent amount of snaps, over Carlos Hyde, and just pick up like some garbage time points. So another guy that's just kind of a flyer person there. Let's go on to wide receiver now. So receiver starts with Antonio Brown. Love it. Love him. Think he maybe scores most points on the slate. I think he's just going to be a beast. He's great at home. Kansas City's secondary is not good at all. Their defense is going to give up tons of points. Big Ben's much better at home, and Antonio Brown is just. I would not be surprised we got a 152 touchdown game from him with 10 catches. That would not be out of the realm of possibility. The problem is 8,800, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to fit him in. If I can, I'm going to do it, but it's going to be tough. So we'll see kind of what we can do. But GPP 100% going to have exposure to him, and love to have him in cash. See what we can do. It's probably a little bit easier to fit him in on FanDuel, but let's see where things go. Michael Thomas, just think he's a little too expensive. Julio, same thing, too expensive. Obviously, both can't go wrong with both plays, but just a little too expensive. Hopkins, if I go, with my lineups where I have Deshaun Watson, definitely going to go with Hopkins. Keenan Allen, Buffalo again, is just terrible. Chargers are going to score points. He's going to have a big day. It's just a matter of, again, can you fit, this guy in? Tyreek Hill, you want to have exposure to that Kansas City-Pittsburgh game, like I keep mentioning. And it seems like him and Mahomes just have a thing. So if I have Mahomes as my quarterback, would love to have some Tyreek Hill along with him. Not really going to be that much interested in Thielen or Diggs. Nothing in Hilton or Devontae's a little banged up. And going against Minnesota, don't want that. The next guys here that I really like, Schuster and Landry. So Smith-Schuster, again, it just comes back to this being a high-scoring game. I love Antonio Brown, and I like Schuster too. I don't think you'd be crazy to do a GPP with both of them and Big Ben. If we look at Smith-Schuster and what he did last week, he had 8 targets, 119 yards. So had a good day, did well. And why can't he repeat this again and get a touchdown in a high-scoring offensive shootout type of a game? I think the wealth can be spread around. And I'm not against playing him just as a one-off either. You could just, maybe Brown gets the yardage and Schuster gets, the touchdowns this week. So I think Smith-Schuster's a great play. Jarvis Landry, the guy just continues to do it. 15 targets last week, 100 yards. He's just a target machine and a reception machine. I just think for cash, almost every week, you just slot him in and forget about it. I still think he's cheap at 6,300. I think they're going to get down in this game. They're going to be throwing, like I said, all the way till the end of the game because I could see them being down by 14, 17 points. Just have to keep throwing. And so I like Landry. And that's why I like kind of Josh Gordon a little bit too. Obviously, Landry is much safer for the cash game plays, but I really think the script for this game is New Orleans gets up early and often, and Cleveland is just throwing to get back into the game, and that's great for the receivers. Emmanuel Sanders too. I like both Denver receivers. I like Sanders. I also like Demaryius Thomas. Look at Sanders last game, 10 catches on 11 targets, 135 yards and a touchdown. Him and Keenan just seem to kind of have a rapport, and Oakland's just not very good on defense. So I really like him. I mentioned Demaryius Thomas too, who's actually at 5,600 and cheaper than Emmanuel Sanders, and I think more people are going to be on Sanders. So if you go with Thomas, could be a little contrarian there, and even himself. 10 targets for him, 6 catches, 63 yards and a touchdown last week. I think he could have the same type of a game, and he's gonna have weeks where he's better than Emmanuel Sanders. It's gonna be each week something different about who leads the team and yards and kind of targets overall. So if you can need to save $600, why not go from Sanders down to Demaryius Thomas? Because I really do think that both are just going to be guys you could play every week, and especially in this juicy matchup against Oakland, who I just don't think is going to be very good all year long. We mentioned Josh Gordon. If we keep scrolling down here, Pierre Garçon is a guy, a cheap play that I like, especially if Goodwin's going to be out of the game. Garçon then moves up to the wide receiver 1, and he's just going to get volume. Obviously, he had 6 targets last week, only 2 catches, but he also dropped a touchdown pass that he probably catches 9 times out of 10. And, with Goodwin out, this could be up to double-digit targets. So why not in a kind of probably a more high-scoring game against Detroit? We love Garoppolo. I don't think he's a bad play at all. I'm going to definitely have some of him. We move down. You got some cheap guys here that I like too. Galladay, Funchess, and Enunwa. I like Enunwa because he's just going to get tons of targets. I mean, we saw it, 10 targets. He had a touchdown, 63 yards. He seems to be Darnold's go-to guy. So you get him for 4,700. I think you just lock him in. So we're going to lock him in because I just don't know if you're going to find just the value there anywhere else with, someone getting 10 targets for 4,700. I think it's just too good to pass up. Funchess is another person that 4,700, he's going to be the number one receiver. With Olsen gone now, this is going to balloon up. We saw it last year. Olsen was out. Funchess got more involved. I think it's going to happen again. It's just I don't love the matchup on the road at Atlanta. So I'm going to not, I'd rather go with Enunwa. But Funchess is a good play. And then Galladay, 12 targets, 7 catches, 114 yards. Is he turning into the number one receiver in Detroit? Might be. Tate's got that kind of the slot role done, and people like Marvin Jones, but maybe Galladay takes over and he becomes kind of the outside threat there and overtakes Marvin Jones, and you're getting him at 4,800. Love me some Galladay. So, Cobb is another guy that's not a terrible play. 4,600. You saw everyone knows what he did last week, and if Rodgers is hobbled, he's gonna have to stay in the pocket, and that means more targets to the slot. He's gonna be trying to get the ball out as quick as he can, and that kind of takes away from Devontae Adams and push things more towards Randall Cobb, who's kind of works the slot, gets the underneath type stuff, and then if he can get free, he has a really big day. If not, he could still end up with 6-7 catches for 50, 60 yards and still get you double-digit points for that $4,600 price point, which is pretty good. So that's kind of my plays at wide receiver. We're going to leave this for now. We'll come back and see kind of what we could do after we talk about the tight ends and defense. So if we go up to tight ends, obviously Gronkowski, but tough matchup. I don't hate him in GPPs. Jacksonville, actually, if there's one weak point, it's covering the tight ends. So, and Gronk's the best tight end to ever play. So I could definitely see him having a day, but I'm just not going to pay up for that when there's some cheap guys that I really like. Ertz, again, can't go wrong with Ertz. He gets receptions. Tampa Bay, I think, is going to be pretty trash defending the pass this year. And we saw that week 1 as Drew Brees just shredded them, and New Orleans did in general. So why not? Travis Kelce is going to be under the radar. If you're looking for more exposure to that Kansas City-Pittsburgh game, everyone's going to be on Tyreek Hill and Antonio Brown and Connor, and Kelce's going to be kind of under-owned, I think. So why not get some exposure to that game? The problem is we haven't seen Mahomes really kind of get a rapport with Kelce yet, but Kelce's just so talented. Why not? Why couldn't it be this week? Keep moving on. Jordan Reed is a good play, I think, at 5,000. He got a really good matchup. And last week, he scored the touchdown and, had a solid day. That's kind of what he does, and I could see him having a bigger day. Alex Smith loves the tight end and loves running backs. So that's what you're trying to target when you're playing with Washington, because he's more of going to throw it to those positions than the outside guys at receiver. We move down. So it's these three are really the big boys, I think, that everyone's going to have. Either Doyle, Kittle, or Cook. All had good games last week. All have good matchups. And I think they have all good matchups this week as well. So why not go back to the well? Why not grab them? And they're all cheap. 4,000, 3,800, and 3,600. I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. I like Kittle the best, and I have Garoppolo in my lineup. So that's where I want to go to kind of get that stacking situation. So I'm going to go slot Kittle in. Now let's go to defense. So obviously everyone's going to go after the Rams and the Chargers. Buffalo and Arizona are probably the two worst teams in football. And the Rams have a great defense, so that's a recipe for disaster for the Arizona offense. The problem is they're really expensive, $3,700 for a defense. Chargers are $3,600. You could just slot either one of them in there. I'd lean more Charger just because you saved the $100, and I just think Buffalo's so horrific that I'm probably going to try to target them almost every week. Just who's playing Buffalo? Josh Allen in his first game. What's that going to be like? I could definitely see a couple picks. It's going to be very interesting. If we're looking at other defenses, I think the Eagles are a great play. People may be on Fitzpatrick after last week. I'm not buying it. I could see we really regress back to the mean. Eagles are a phenomenal defense, and I just see them dominating the game. So I really like the Eagles a lot. And if you want to pivot off these two and get some exposure to another defense that's going to put up a lot of points potentially, Eagles. If you move a little bit further down, some of the plays I like are the Redskins. Again, they just get a juicy matchup playing Indy. Andrew Luck is aggressive. You could get a pick or two out of him, and they just don't have much talent. And it's the bottom line. They're not good up front. You could get a bunch of sacks, get some turnovers, and I think Washington wins that game pretty comfortably. So that's a good play if you want to kind of pay down. And I don't also hate the Jets, too. I think that they were really good last week. They're home, kind of a rivalry game against the Dolphins. I don't think Miami is very good offensively. They just don't have many weapons. Tannehill doesn't scare me. So I could see them just having a really solid game if you really want to pay down at defense. I would not mind you going with the Jets. We're going to throw the Eagles in just to save. I really like all three of these defenses, and they're the cheapest. So let's go with the Eagles. So that kind of leaves us 6,000 left per position. We need two receivers and a flex. So if we go back to receiver, I said that I really liked Jarvis Landry in cash games. So let's try to slot Jarvis Landry in there. Let's do that. And then we have 5,800 left. We could do Gordon. We could do Emmanuel Sanders. We got Garcon and Galladay, who we liked a lot. Demaryius Thomas here at 5,600. A lot of ways that we could go. Let's see if we put Sanders in. What does that leave us with at 5,500? Leaves us, we could do Adrian Peterson, who we really liked. So that's an option. Let's back up and let's say we go with Galladay at receiver. What does that leave us? 6,900. We could go all the way up to someone like a Dalvin Cook or a Smith-Schuster. Leaves us Emmanuel Sanders as well. There's a lot of ways that we could go here. Let's just try one more thing. Let's say that we go with Demaryius Thomas, and then what does that leave us with? 6,100. Yeah, don't necessarily love what we got there. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go with Emmanuel Sanders. I really, really like him. And then in the flex, 5,500, Adrian Peterson. Get the running back. I like him in that game. I think that they're going to get a big and just run the clock out. And so I really like that play. I like having running backs also in my flex position. I think for cash games. So that gives us kind of a strong lineup overall. So we get Garoppolo, who we love. We get Gordon and Connor, who are really two core plays of ours. Landry and Sanders, two more core players of ours at receiver. We throw a Nunwa in there, who's just a guy who's going to get us really good floor, going to get volume. We love Kittle. He's our favorite play at tight end for the price point, so we get him as well. Adrian Peterson, who we just spoke about, and then we get the Eagles defense at 3,400. So I think this is just a solid team overall and be a really good way to go for a cash lineup. But, think about kind of the guys that you like. Obviously, I outlined a bunch of different players, and kind of just mix and match and see what you guys can come up with. I think there's a lot of different ways to play this slate. Obviously, you see the guys that I like, the guys that I'm going to be targeting, but I think that there's a bunch of different ways to attack this slate. And if you kind of follow, a bunch of the core plays and guys that I talked about in this video, I think that you'll all be off to a really good start. So, good luck this weekend. Please like the video, comment if you have any questions or anything like that, and it'd be great if you guys could subscribe if you like the content. I'm going to continue to have these throughout the year. We're going to continue to have kind of showdown videos and full games, full Sunday slates for the NFL season as well. So it's been real. I'm Zizzle, and I'll talk to you guys next time.